Hey awesome people, Paul here again, and obviously got our mate Dira Wong, who's our spirit guide for these conversations. He's hanging around helping us out. So I just thought I'd do a couple of videos on some of the spiritual side of this war. So when I say the war, 2020 was actually an attack on the people. Some of us realised that it's actually a spiritual war first and foremost. And I think that's the side that's actually been ignored to a point. Everyone's going down rabbit holes with data and things like that, and that's fine. I do it a little bit myself. However, no one really gets or talks about the spiritual side of this war, and I'm not talking religion. Okay? So before I go on, I consider myself an omniist. And an omniist is someone who sees some value and truth in all particular faiths, religion, beliefs, but doesn't adhere to any single one. Okay, so I consider myself an omniist. So in 2022, when this spiritual war kicked off, we all faced the first test, which was, are you going to honour your free will that was bestowed upon you by the Creator? Whoever you say the Creator is, that's your business. But that was the free will test. And we were like this picture here with Gandalf. We had our staff in one hand, our sword in the other, and we're cracking it in the ground, drawing a line saying, you do not pass. And what we're actually saying is, we have the right to make free will choices of our own, and we get to decide what we do in this life, what we participate in, forget the medical experiment, but in general life. The medical experiment, that was a nexus point, a bottleneck that we had to pass through. And we all stood there and said, you have to honour our free choices, our free will. And that's great, because that meant you passed Free Will 101. But then, since then, which I find this somewhat ironic, there's been a hell of a lot of finger pointing going on. I call them pistol fingers. Because as soon as we see someone we don't agree with, we go, fucking look at that. Bang, look at that. And him and her. Okay? I would put it to you that if you can't respect other people's free will choices, then you have not passed the first test. You certainly haven't passed Free Will 102. And effectively, you're actually being the problem right now, because we need to create unity, bring people together, no matter what their free will choices are. Again, in 2020, we all stood there and said, you need to honour our decisions, and we need to be able to decide for ourselves. If that's the case, if that's what you want for yourself, you are duty bound to give that to someone else. As the quote from Gandhi says, be the change you wish to see in this world. Now, I think this spiritual test, by the way, isn't just a spiritual test. I actually think it's like a rites of passage or an initiation for the species. Just as above, so below. So as we used to have initiation and rites of passage for people, I believe this is actually some kind of an initiation of the species. And we are getting out of the system and waking up from the system, and we are actually a very young species. And so if you think of us being young kids, toddlers literally, in the galactic sense, I think that this is a big spiritual test, that if we pass, we can emerge from this matrix system, control system. If not, we go back down into it, and we probably do another cycle, which could take quite some time. And if we do another cycle, we have to go through all this again. So how do we stop going through this cycle? Well, we've got to see past any of our differences, look at our similarities and the stuff that we have in common, and just accept each other as each of us want to be. As long as you're not committing a crime according to common law, or have you caused any harm, damage or loss to someone? Well, if not, it's not a crime. So apart from that, it's all about respecting other people's choices just like you wish for them to respect yours. So I'd like to now go back to the pistol fingers. He's of this, they're of that. It recently came out, and when I say recently, this is now February, mid to late February 2023. So it was over the past literally year, we've had a lot of people with the pistol fingers out. And some months ago, it sort of started to emerge that anything up to 50%, maybe even more, of online activities is actually bots, AI, and a bit of Operation Mockingbird. And Operation Mockingbird's been around since television arrived and never stopped. There is no end of it. So, if there is all this activity that is actually geared towards influencing your mental capabilities, which it is a mental war, and they are using technology to access and influence you, how do you know the validity of the source that you're quoting? Because there's a lot of people that just hit the share button without doing any investigation, and before you know it, something goes viral, because we all need to be first these days. And before you know it, everyone thinks this is a fact. But how can you be sure of the original content and its origin? It's a fair question. So, I'd like to say, in my past, I had a relationship with a lady. We had a spiritual adventure. She actually went to the dark side, and I'm not going to go into this story. She went to the dark side, and she still gets in contact with me every so often and gives me information. That's all I'm going to say about that. I'm not going into my past story, because it's just too much for some people. Now, one of the sayings or philosophies, let's say, this goes back to all these online stuff and the lies that the bad guys tell. The best lies include as much truth as possible. Now, great example. Flat Earth has been debunked as a DARPA program. Now, if you don't believe that, you go do your thing. Even 107 recently came out, gave the guy's name that was originally given the Flat Earth protocols to go spread, and they actually mapped it through the internet and used technology to see who the influencers were and how far this reached. And it was so successful they released it a second time, gave this same guy a second wad of cash to go do that again and create more influence so that they could map it again. And when I say map it, they want to know who's the key people that distribute information. Who are the ones that others look up to? And how far does it reach? So when you're doing online petitions, etc., I personally think that's all that's going on there. They're mapping how many people are into a subject, for example. So the best lies include as much truth as possible. And the greatest trap known to mankind is the human mind. Think about that. Those two statements go together. They are separate, but they go together. And now I'm going to cap it off with a third one from a completely different individual that I follow. And that person said, and this goes with it, so I'll add it on to the end. So for the greatest trap known to mankind is the human mind, for what the eyes see and the ears hear, the mind believes. Therein is the matrix trap. That's up to you whether you believe me or not. But this is now the real test of the free will side of things is actually 102, not 101. 101 was where you said you need to give me my rights and allow me to make decisions for yourself, and that is absolute. I commend it. Okay, I absolutely stand with you on that. However, it doesn't stop with it's all about you. it's all about us. Like I actually believe in that where we go one, we go all. I actually believe that. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if I want free will autonomy and respect for that, I'm duty bound to allow other people their right to express themselves as they see fit. So all this talking of, finger pointing and shills, grifters, and they're a Mason and they're this and they're that, and I know this and I know that, when you consider half the stuff online's lies, what do we really know? Anyway, again, like I mentioned, the key to this 102 section of the free will, and it's actually a very important thing to the next period of time, is respecting other people's free will choices. Liking and agreeing with them has absolutely nothing to do with it. Nothing at all. But it's their right to live as they see fit, and if they're not causing harm, damage or loss, then it's their right to live as they see fit. So the next little video will talk about the next part of the next challenge of the spiritual war, which is, are you going to take full accountability and responsibility for your life? So I look forward to chatting with you again soon. And it's goodbye from Paul, and it's goodbye from my mate Dirawong. And we'll see you when we see you next. Ciao for now.